Hey, we are continuing through the book of Matthew. We're up to chapter 2. We're going to look at the first few verses of Matthew chapter 2, the part that is traditionally known as the Christmas story. And we're going to see once again, as we did the first 2 weeks all over chapter 1, that Matthew has unlikely heroes and includes some things that may have been surprising and or embarrassing to the Jewish people as he tells the story of Jesus' birth. So stick around. Hey, I'm Stuart Perry, pastor of New Life Community Church in beautiful Burlingame, California. We are a church that believes that a personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ makes all the difference, both in this life and in the life to come. And because of that, we are absolutely committed to pursuing a relationship with God through Jesus with passion, with great courage, with anyone and everyone who would want to join us. We are also committed to doing it with humility by asking questions and seeking answers, recognizing that we don't know everything and we are learners just like everybody else. And we do that because we think it's the best way to learn, and we also do it because we've seen the damage that an arrogant pursuit of God can do to people. You've probably seen that too. If that sounds like something that's interesting to you, then I would encourage you to hit that subscribe button, like this video, leave some comments, turn on the notifications, go to our website and let us know that you're around so that we can get you connected in some way, because that is what this church is all about. And we would love for you to know whenever there's a new sermon or Bible study or some other kind of content, and we would like to help you make some friends. So with that said, we're going to jump right into Matthew chapter 2. This is the story that you may know from your childhood as you are being told what is the meaning of Christmas. It is the story of the birth of Jesus. I am filming this and we're going to do the Bible study this coming Thursday, and it's going to be like Christmas in July, right? Christmas right at the end of the month of July. Doesn't get any better than that. Matthew chapter 2, beginning with verse 1. It reads like this. Oh, and as I read, ask yourself, what would be surprising in this? A great way to sort of figure out what the intention of the author is, what the intention of God is to ask yourself, what surprises me? What would have maybe been surprising to the people to whom it was first written, right? Because you write something to convince or persuade somebody, and so there needs to be something that causes tension. And I think that there is definitely something that causes tension, and there's a couple of things that might be surprising and cause tension in this passage. Matthew chapter 2, beginning with verse 1. It says this: After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we've come to worship him." So let me just make a few comments here. King Herod sort of dates the thing. Herod is a family name, but this probably refers to Herod the Great, who lived from around 30 BC to about 4 BC. The dating is a little bit off on Jesus' birth, most scholars think, so that would have put Herod alive when Jesus was born. The Magi are traditionally the wise men. In some traditions, it's kings. They would have been probably astrologers to a king. It says they came from the east. One of the interesting things is that probably puts them in Babylon or Persia. Certainly Babylon, the great Babylonian captivity was sort of next to their slavery in Egypt. That was the other major sort of slavery or horrible period in the history of Israel. So to bring sort of wise men, or like I said, in some other places, kings, in to worship the one born to be king in Israel from the east, from Babylon, is an incredible reversal of Israel's history. So there's some symbolism there. It says they followed his star, right? So there's multiple levels, right? Because they're not Christian, they're pagans, and so they're astrologers. They're following a star, and yet God uses that. God uses their own pagan religion to bring them to Jesus. We've got to think about that at some level. God uses their pagan beliefs, nature, to bring them and to show them the truth of who Jesus is. And they come to worship. It says they come to pay him homage. come to worship him. Okay, so verse 3. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Probably doesn't mean the common people in Jerusalem, probably just means the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the religious and political leaders. It's sort of like, there was some bad news nationally, and all of Washington was disturbed. It doesn't mean every, the construction workers and the cafeteria workers and stuff like that. They're talking about the political class, the religious class, the elite class. All of Jerusalem was disturbed with him. Now, of course, these are the Jews who are awaiting their Messiah, but they're not excited in the same way that the foreigners are excited. So he had called together all the people's chief priests and the teachers of the law, and he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. And then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. So he needed both scripture and astrology, scripture and nature, in a sense, to nail down not only where the Messiah was to be born, but as it was happening, when it was happening. And so he sent them, verse 8, he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him. Of course, we know he's lying because he wants to kill him. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star that they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. And they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And after having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, so God intervenes again in a way that they would understand in a dream, they returned to their country by another route. So Matthew's writing to a time, and it's pretty well, the consensus is pretty strong that Matthew is writing to his fellow Jews and trying to encourage the faith of Jews who are Christian, and maybe trying to persuade Jews who are not yet persuaded to follow Jesus and be Christians. And one of the challenges is that, particularly for the ones who aren't Christian yet, they've got the law, they've got the scriptures, but they're not quite there. And so there's this interesting interplay between scripture and nature in Matthew, that nature can get you part of the way to God. It can tell you certain things about God, but it can't give you all the details, because the Magi, because of the star, they knew a king had been born, and they knew kind of where he was, but they didn't know exactly. They needed people who knew the scriptures to help them sort out the details. And I think that's an important thing for many people, have a kind of a sense of God, a sense that there is a God, there must be a higher power. If you've ever been to one of the 12-step groups, a lot of people talk about a higher power and talk about God in vague terms because they know in their soul and in their spirit that there's something there. They just don't, they can't put flesh on it. They can't make it definite. And sometimes that's because of fear, and sometimes it's just because of lack of knowledge. And that's the role Scripture brings in, is it creates some definition to God. It tells us in very specific terms, look over there, there's Jesus. That's what God looks like. And then here's the implications, and here's how to live it out. And so we need both the natural revelation, the things that we can see in nature, the things that we can feel in our hearts, and we need the scriptures to discern God. And I think that might be important for Matthew's audience. And I think, just as I pointed out, many people today have trouble putting the definition on God, or the flesh on what it might mean to have a higher power and have a God. So I want to point that out. Another thing that I want to point out, and I did just a minute ago, is that the wise men come from the east. So there's like this political reversal where the Jews were forced to sort of bow down to Babylon at one point, Now the Babylonian kings or astrologers who were advisors to the king come and bow down and worship Jesus. I think that's really important to see. Another important thing to see is, and this might be the thing that would have been most surprising, is that Herod and the chief priests and the scribes should be the heroes of the story. This is the ruler and the priests and everybody that should recognize the Messiah and celebrate him and be happy about him and do what he says, and they're the ones that you would expect to be worshiping. They're the good people who do everything right. And yet they're the ones that are trying to kill him. They're the ones that don't even recognize the presence of the star in the sky. It takes the foreign astrologers, and to have them be foreigners is bad enough. To have them likely be from Babylon, the traditional enemy. It's really remarkable that in this gospel, the first people to recognize the true identity of the Christ are foreign pagans. And I think that should say something to us. And maybe, especially for those of us who've been Christian and been Christian for a long time, and maybe one interesting question to come out of this is, how has God, what's the last thing you learned about God from someone who wasn't a Christian authority figure? And do you seek to gain understanding about God from people who may be in less traditionally teaching roles? Me, or some other person maybe in the Bible study who's been a Christian for a long time. I remember once, a number of years ago when we lived in Bangkok, observing one of the Buddhist monks on his morning alms walk. They walked early in the morning. They would walk with bowls, and they would present the bowls at houses and small businesses as they were opening up. And monks are not allowed to work and earn any money or food, so they rely on the donations of the people. And I just remember watching this particular monk, and he was receiving donations, and he came to a store, and the store owner came out, and I didn't get all of it, but what I understood basically was, I'm so sorry, Father, but I don't have anything I can give, but can you bless my store anyway? And I know the monk then did some chanting and blessed the store, but if I understood correctly what the monk said, and again, I may have missed this, but I think what he said was something along the lines of, the blessing that I give does not depend on the gift that you give. And I just remember thinking, what a profound spiritual teaching. And I remember kind of being taken aback that God used a Buddhist monk to teach me something fundamental, or to remind me of something fundamental about how Christian ministry should be. That the blessing we give to people should never depend on the gift or the blessing or the honor or anything like that they give to us. So let me end there. What is something that you have learned from a non-Christian? And I think this passage gives us a lot of stuff to talk about. So the Bible study, if you're watching this early enough, the actual Bible study is going to take place Thursday night, July 30th at 7 p.m. And the Zoom ID and password are in the description to this video. And I hope to see you then. If not, then leave comments or ask questions through email or however you may want to communicate. But have a blessed afternoon.